morning, Patrick Johnston. I guess it's still morning where you are. Yeah,
Yep.
you're in Mini, right? So you're Central
Yeah.
Time Zone. So
Yeah.
nice to be back on the road after a couple of years away. We'll get into that in a second. We're going to talk all things Canucks, the angst, the panic, and should they be doing that? But I did want to start the video off by thanking Woody's RV. You can reach them at woodysrv.com for sponsoring this video. As I said, apropos that you're on the road, Patrick, you can go on the road everywhere. I was looking again, like they don't give us a script or anything. They gladly support everything we do. They have a deal of the week where this week they're offering $50,000 off a brand new
What?
fifth wheel. So it's 120. And I'm thinking with the Vancouver housing market, like, I don't know, that might be an option.
I think we've done stories on that, haven't we?
Yeah. Let's all buy RVs and go on the road with the Canucks.
Yeah, there you go.
So you can check out their deal of the week, Western Canada's largest selection of RVs, woodysrv.com. Good friends out there in Abbotsford. Okay, so let's talk about the Canucks on the road. Obviously, I think it's easy to stitch the four games together and talk about perchance a bit of a panic because they have blown leads in every game. Had they just lost four, I think people would still be upset, but it's not, and it's not just blowing leads. We know they've had a multiple goal lead in every game.
Yeah.
How worried should fans be?
I think some of it, and as I said in my story that I wrote about sort of the fan reaction, both to Garland's scratching, but also just the state of affairs in general. If this were middle of the season, I think people wouldn't necessarily. I mean, nobody wants to see a 4-game losing streak. But I think people be like, well, these things happen.
Well,
but
this year might be the year that you want to see a 4-game losing streak. But
yeah. But the fact that it is the beginning of the season obviously adds to the sort of weight of it all, and then the way, as you said, and the way it's happened, that they can't hold on to these leads, that they simply don't have an extra gear, whether it's that they're tired, they're just simply not good enough, or they're not focused, or whatever reason you want to bring it on. That's what's been happening, and the bigger picture issues are there. It's a concern. I mean, I asked Tyler Myers. I mean, his first game, he plays in Columbus, and I asked him, you've been watching everything. Now you're in it. Like, what have you seen? And he basically said, we got to play defense. And like, it's, I mean, it was damning in its bluntness. And there's a guy who generally tries to sort of take the, sort of positive, and then you back it up with what Luke Schen's been kind of harping on since preseason. We've got to be harder. We got to just push in more, which, you start adding it all up and you start trying to get a sense of, trying to think about how this team is feeling, and the mood, and the frustration levels. They're going to win at some point. Maybe they're winning tonight in Minnesota. Maybe they're, the more they don't, the more this is going to snowball, and the emotions are going to run. We saw what happened last year. It's like you basically stop moving, you stop skating, and the coach gets fired. And I mean,
you put yourself behind the 8 ball, and then you have to play at an elite level the rest of the season just to get in the playoffs, right? So, I don't think that they're going to be in that same position. You're right. It's 4 games they started on the road. But I did want to ask you about something here. Okay, so that's fine for Schenn and Myers to say we got to play defense. They don't have a good defense. You've talked about this since last year. I've seen numerous experts this week say, including Yannick Hansen yesterday, they knew the defense was bad. There's lots of narrative out there that they tried to fix it but couldn't. So maybe if you get up 2 goals, you should try and get up 3 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals. If you don't have a good defense, rely on Demko and try and outscore teams. But it's like we've seen it now 4 games in a row. They get a lead. Maybe they try and be a little more conservative. They don't have the talent to do that. Should they be looking at changing their approach, or is that completely counter to Bruce Boudreau's nature?
I don't think they're giving up goals because they're pressing too far in the offensive zone. I mean, the fact they have been scoring, but scoring's up around the league. Everybody's scoring.
No, Patrick. What I'm saying is, when you have a lead, just keep trying to score more instead of trying to protect the league, because they don't have good defenders.
Yeah, sure. Try to win game 7-6. I mean, sure. it's harder to score 7 goals than it is to score. I get what you're saying.
Well, it
At the
seems pretty
bottom
hard
line,
to stop
the
4
other thing
goals.
is, honestly, you know what else would be nice? They need to get some saves. I mean, Spencer Martin, the tying goal, and I talked to him a bit about it, and he was mad. I mean, he doesn't show a lot of emotion. He's a very calm guy. But I asked him about that goal that he gave with Johnny Gaudreau, where Gaudreau came swooping all the way in, came flying in, in the way that we know he does. And he swooped around and scored that wraparound goal. If you watch, Martin overplays it coming in, loses the net, and then doesn't have time to scramble. And those are key mistakes. I mean, there's key mistakes made on almost every goal that they've given up, where it was a turnover, like Noel Juleson in Washington. There's a bad turnover. Again in Washington, Bo Horvat's line, he loses a faceoff clean. The last person you expect to see that happen loses a faceoff clean. At the end of the day, they could really use a save, and they just got to they're going to have to make fewer mistakes. And it may be that they're just not, that this is what they are, that they can do one thing well, which is score goals, and the rest is just a nightmare to them, and they're just going to have to roll the dice. I mean, that was kind of the story last year. They needed huge performances from Thatcher Demko many, many nights, and they got them, and they haven't had anything like that. But the Demko's been very average in the first 3 games, and Spencer Martin was pretty good, but then had a couple of crucial mistakes in the third period. They didn't lose because of the goalie, but they might have won if they've gotten a big performance. And I think that more than anything, they need a big performance, whether it's from the goalie or they need big performance in defense. Like, they need some big performances at this point, because otherwise, we've seen the result, and it's just not been good enough.
All right, so let's. It's kind of tough because we want these videos to have some air and live beyond the present day, but we know they're playing Minnesota tonight. Minnesota, it's funny, heading into the game against Columbus, 2 winless teams, who's gonna, and it was Columbus. Now Minnesota, 2 winless teams. There's only 3 winless teams in the NHL, and the Canucks are one of them. So whatever happens tonight will happen. Then they come home. I'm assuming they'll get a fair amount of juice on Saturday against the Sabres. Home crowd, and man, more marketing slogans than I can shake a stick at. I heard another one last night, Power Rising or something. It's their 3rd marketing slogan of the year. More marketing slogans than wins, to be honest with you. I know you've written on special teams this week, but some of the issues that we've talked about, just looking, and again, I know it's a small sample size, they're 6th in goals, the 6th worst goals against, 15th best goals for. Power play, 23rd in the league. Penalty kill, 31st in the league. What's the biggest problem?
It's defense. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the thing, because they've been scoring, but they've been scoring kind of, like I was trying to say earlier, kind of this like pretty average rate. It's not like they have this elite offense right now, but they are scoring. It's the defense. I mean, the worst penalty kill in the league. Looked a bit better against Columbus, but then again, Columbus is not. They've got Zach Werenski's a great defenseman, and Johnny Gaudreau's a great forward, but it's not the deepest team there. There's a team that's very much with its eyes on the future. Looked better in Columbus, but still have a ways to go to get themselves into the league average. They have to pull off a run of PKs, and as I wrote the other day, it's been bleeding into the defense. And I think the thing that I would be most concerned about if I were a Canucks fan is what we've seen over the course of this road trip. Coming into it, we knew it was going to be, it's a long way to go. Edmonton, Philly, but then Philly, Washington, Columbus. There's not a lot of distance. They had some time off in Philly. It was a lot of games, but that's what they do. And also the opposition, isn't exactly like Washington. Obviously has some top end talent still, are a strong team, but Philly, there's a team that's rebuilding. Columbus, same story. And that to me is the biggest concern, is that for the most part, in 2 of their first 4 games, the opposition has not been that strong, and even against those teams, their defense hasn't been very good, and that in the end has been the number one issue for this team. And they've just they're going to have to figure it out, and if they don't, they're going to get nowhere, because in the end, as they say themselves, the problem is not scoring goals here. The problem is keeping them out of their own net, and whether that means they just need to take a few more deep breaths in the third period, and just realize that they've done this before, they know how to do it, or do something completely different and throw things out the window and try some new defensemen, try some new pairings, try some new lines, try some new deployments, put, different forwards out in the moments, based on what they've been doing, change up how they're running their rotation. Something's got to turn, because they're not going to get anywhere if they can't defend. If they can't defend, let alone defend leads in the third period.
Losing 4 games is one thing. Blowing multi-goal leads in every single game is another. Is there a problem with the mentality of this team? Leadership, perhaps?
It's tough to say. It's there. There was obviously this noise on Wednesday about the idea of there's a bunch of cliques in the room and things like that. And every team has its groups of guys. When teams are winning, no one really seems to care. When teams are losing, of course, it gets magnified. And I think in the end, what it is going to come down to is finding some success, and they don't have any right now. And so as a result, the guys are, players are inevitably going to feel frustrated and look around and try to figure out what the heck is wrong here, what the heck is wrong there. And that to me, more than anything, is where their focus has to be. They have to just buckle down, figure out what they're doing, and get the job done. Because in the end, this is the group they have. It's not about rah-rah speeches. It's about showing up and doing the work. And
so who's not showing up and doing the work?
I think that's a fascinating question, and it's something they're never gonna, I am still trying to try to figure that one out, because that's something it's something they talked about last year. It's something that's come up this year. It's, whether that's just talk or that's a real thing is something to find out. I think in the end, there's certainly a perception among some of the players is that some of the other players, you can just, the way they talk, is that there's people that aren't getting the job done. And to me, how the reaction to the Garland scratching plays out may tell us a lot about how people are feeling. I don't think anybody has the impression that Connor Garland is that guy. Connor Garland is a guy that is supposedly the guy that drags them into the fight. He's supposed to be sort of a leader and a guy who's in there all the time. And
so why scratch him then?
Yeah, I know, and that's the thing that I find so fascinating. In the end of that, so Boudreau said, he said, I know, whether it was an impact, he was trying to make some sort of impact, broader impact. I don't know. It struck me as one of those decisions that can get coaches in trouble, because the players have to believe most of what the coach is doing, and when the coach starts grasping at straws, as that one seemed to be a bit like, the players are going to start going, what the heck's going on here? And if it's, that's another one of those snowball things. And if it doesn't turn into win, if they had won, they went, okay, coach, that was, I was risky, but it worked. But it didn't work. And so we'll see how things play out tonight, and we'll see how things play out on Saturday, because there is a little bit of a sense of trying to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks in terms of fixing these problems.
I have to admit, Patrick, I was kind of laughing when, just the irony of this week, I saw that the Italian national team had named Mike Keenan as their head coach.
Right.
Now, Keenan famously, when he was in Philadelphia, had the Sutter twins, and it was widely acknowledged that Ron was better than Rich.
Yes.
And when Rich wasn't playing well, he benched Ron and scratched Ron to play this game between it. I'm not suggesting that's what Bruce Boudreau did, but I think you're right. If you try and play games with a team as fragile as the Canucks right now, and you're benching a guy who most people wouldn't think should be scratched, to send a message to the rest of the group, that could backfire spectacularly. So we'll see where that goes. I did touch on leadership.
If I could just say on that is the nice edge that you walk anytime as a coach, right?
Of course,
these decisions are tricky ones, and you have to hit the right notes, and that's going to be the challenge for him. Is that obviously this is a group of players who really have enjoyed playing for him and want to believe, but as has happened in every single place he's been in, we're only we're still 10 months into 11 months into his time in charge here. Every place he's been, there's been a certain moment where he's had to say, in the end, I can only motivate these guys so much. If they don't want to lay down and block shots or whatever, there's not something, and that happens to every coach. I don't think we're at that point yet, but nonetheless, like I said, there's that snowball effect where you can run into where a coach just can't connect with his players for whatever reason anymore, and sometimes the coach is the easy thing, but sometimes it just you gotta change the group up, and I think that's the thing that's we're still seeing here is that, despite everything, it's still basically the same group that played last year. Obviously, there's been a few changes up front, but mostly it's the same defense, and we'll see how things go.
This, I did not think I'd be like trotting this out this early in the season, but um, I do wonder where this team goes if they continue to struggle. Of course, like again, I think every team is going to suffer 4 losses in a row at some point in the season. If these just happen to be, it just happens to be the start of the season for the Canucks and they level out through the rest of the season, no big deal. But you do look at it, you lose again tonight, that's 5. So again, you have to then win 5 in a row just to get back to 500, which gets you nowhere near the playoffs. So you keep digging that hole deeper and deeper and deeper. Your sense, where is there a chance of a shake up this team? Either, I saw some ludicrous suggestion about a coaching change. Now, I don't think we're in Bill LaForge territory, lose the first 20 games and you change. You know what you have in Boudreau. We had success last year. You obviously have to be a little more patient on that. But a trade would be a possibility down the road. I'm not suggesting anything would happen in the immediate future. But if this team does continue to struggle and stays sort of well below playoff contention for the first 20, 25, 30 games, do you get a sense that there's the appetite to make a pretty drastic move in terms of a trade or a personnel change or something? Or is this kind of what the team's going to be for a while and they'll live and die with it, and next offseason is when you'd see some big moves?
I don't think they would hesitate to do a trade if they could do it. I think the challenge is going to be just where the salary cap is right now, and the fact that so many teams are at the limit and making changes is difficult. So yeah, I mean, if they played conservative over the summer, they had a few ideas they wanted to move or make, but in the end couldn't make it work because of whether the price they was asking for was too high or potential trade partners went elsewhere. They played it conservative, but they've started to sort of go in a direction. Signing Miller, trading for Riley Stillman. They're trying to build this into a team that they think is what they want, and what it's going to be going forward. And that, in the end, is they've made a choice there, but we'll see. I think we're still in that mode where like maybe there is some wiggle room that they can find. But I go back to all the kind of rhetoric that we've heard, which is that they have been consistently underwhelmed by the defense group. They know they don't have a whole. There's no depth. I mean, you can see how they feel about Jack Rathbone. I mean, the guy hasn't played, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in Abbotsford very soon. They've already turned, sort of tried to shift the direction there, but I said like adding Stillman, who in the end is a bottom pairing defenseman at best. So it's not like he's moving the meter, but there's sort of a sense of how the types of players they want. And so to me, that was a sign of like, okay, they'd like to find higher end versions of Stillman, but I don't know if they can actually do that now. But like you said, they're already in a bit of a hole, right? Like you playing 500 hockey doesn't get you into the playoffs at this point. They're already in a spot where they're going to have to play better than 500 hockey. Now, to get in as a minimum, to get in, over the course of a season, you have to play better than 500 hockey. So the Canucks are already going to have to turn the ship in a direction that they kind of aren't, like they haven't shown any inkling of. Like I said, they're scoring, but they're scoring kind of at a league average rate. They're not actually, it's not like this is a top end offense being sunk by the league's worst defense. It's an average offense being sunk by some pretty terrible defense. And, they are at risk of getting into that spot where it is the old proverb of just, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting things to be different. And logic tells us that at some point, if things aren't working, they're going to have to try to mix things up. But they also said they were going to do that in the summer, and they didn't do that in the summer. So I'm a wait and see on this. I guess I both could see it, but also skeptical that a trade could happen, even if they aren't going very well.
Who's been their best player?
Best player has been Elias Pettersson. Which is a good story. Like that's an important thing that is absolutely an important thing to highlight. Like the guy came in, you could see came in on a mission. Like he's been really focused. He's really, you can just see he looks stronger. He looks more sort of imposing. He's been producing. He's been scoring. I think about that 2-on-1 he had with Horvat on the PK in Columbus that Horvat scored on, and just the power and precision that Pettersson had in the whole sequence, taking the puck, leading the rush, putting the perfect saucer pass across. Just the energy and power in it was so impressive, and that this is the player that the Canucks have been wanting to see, and that's the good sign. That's what they can build around, and of course the opposite is that JT Miller has been so terrible, and
I was
I
going
think
to ask you who needs to step it up. Is he?
well, I mean, that's the obvious one, right? Like he's just looked so lost so often defensively. I think he's a player who does need an emotional reset. I think he's a guy that definitely needs to figure out a way, like however it is, get back to that groove he was in last year, where he was energetic, he was passionate, but he wasn't letting himself sort of get carried away. And you do wonder, when you just see how sort of all over the map he is in terms of his positioning and whatnot, that he's just not in sync with himself. And more than anything, the Canucks. I mean, that's a guy the Canucks need to sort. I mean, partly because the coaches lean on him to be a two-way player. He's not. Which is it's strange because I think anybody who watches him knows he's not a great defensive player, but the team wants him to be, and they're giving him the opportunity to be. And he's not going to turn into a defensive dynamo overnight, but they need something. They just need more from him in that sense. And if they get that, that's going to go a long way. And it's funny, both these questions, neither of them is a defenseman, and they need, Quinn Hughes they're leaning on Quinn Hughes, but they need people to help Quinn Hughes. Like there's just so much going on underneath him. They just need more from everyone. They need I like Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I'm skeptical that he can truly get anything close to the player that he used to be, but they clearly believe that he can. And if they can find more from him and find more from Tyler Myers, and the list goes on. But right now, it's just that's they need more from their defense, and they need more from JT Miller, and that's kind of where they're at.
JT Miller and a thin blue line, partners in crime for a bad Canucks start. What can we say, Patrick?
There you go.
Why don't we just leave it there before I get Canucks PR on the phone? Anyway, good that you're on the road. Thank you to Woody's RV again, woodysrv.com. Maybe next time we put the wife and kids in an RV and they can follow you on the road. How's that? You must be looking
all right.
Or,
maybe we should do one of these in an RV. That'd be a good time.
All right. Well, Patrick, we look forward to your reports from the road. I'm sure you're looking forward to getting home for the weekend. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will talk to you again next week.